what I always try to tell people right now is workforce training gives people a purpose, a sense of purpose. And that's what I think a lot of people need right now. And I can get into other areas where we got, for example, veterans. We got programs that are specific for veterans. And I know not all veterans are combat veterans, but especially those that were in combat, suffering from issues. It could be PTSD, it could be anything. They lack that purpose. I mean, they've come back from a theater where they were fighting, and now it's totally different being in civilian life.
Yes.
They need to get that purpose. And again, veterans are just a small example. There's other populations all over that need that sense of purpose. Apprenticeship just accelerates that sense of purpose, and I'll tell you why, because they're getting to work from day one. You give somebody training, yes, they feel like they're motivated. But if you get them training and actually working on something that they feel an accomplishment, I tell everybody, look, just accomplish a small goal, a small objective, one step at a time, then work on the next one. That's how you get people out of poverty, out of situations, out of circumstances that they feel hopeless and out of control.
Dr. Carlos Margo, you are the STC Dean for the Center for Advanced Training and Apprenticeships. So tell us what this role entails.
Yes, this is a department that I oversee, about 15 full-time individuals dedicated to workforce development, more specifically customized workforce training for business and industry. We are a full-service training provider. We're not just providing training. We're providing other aspects of economic development within that, and helping our trainees find jobs, placing them with businesses. Another big aspect of our department is apprenticeship training. And, we started that in earnest in 2018. So we've been doing that for about 6 years now. And that is a big part of our department for the Center for Advanced Training and Apprenticeships. We train individuals, but we also help them get placed in relevant job experiences. And we do that with the help of grant funds, which is part of what we do also, develop grant proposals to help fund some of this training and offset the cost of tuition and fees and books for either the individuals or employers who are contracting with us for training. But in essence, that's what we do at CADA, the Center for Advanced Training. We provide customized training to business and industry, but in the last couple of years, we've been really expanding way beyond business and industry, specifically school districts. So that's what I'd like to also discuss, if we could, is what we're doing with school districts now that is not necessarily dual enrollment, which has traditionally been our, as STC's, relationship with school districts. We're now doing customized training and apprenticeships with many school districts.
Wow. So you started the program was really kicked off in 2018. Workforce training, economic development, they're words sometimes that can be like, what does that mean? What is workforce development? So give me an example. A new company is coming in and they need a certain amount of employees to open up a factory or a company. Give me like a step-by-step, like how you guys come in.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and let me give you some context if I could, because our department has been called different names. Before this, we were industry training and economic development. Before that, we were the Institute for Advanced Manufacturing. Prior to that, when I first started in the early 2000s, we were the Partnership for Business and Industry Training. We've just evolved because our services have changed and evolved and enhanced. But the whole, the key behind what we do and the core of our efforts is providing whatever a new or existing business needs with regards to workforce training, workforce development, education, anything that'll help their employees or new employees get to the level of skills that is needed for them to participate or work at the company or business as efficiently and effectively as possible. That's the core of what we do. So we've been doing this. So we work with either existing companies, as I mentioned, or new companies. And in order for us to do that, we have to work hand in hand with local economic development organizations, McAllen EDC, Mission EDC. We work with FAR EDC. We work with Westlaco, the EDC of Westlaco, for example, and others across our, at STC, 2-county region or district, which is Starr and Hidalgo. We have to work with economic development organizations in order for us to understand what the needs are specifically that they're hearing from industry and prospective industry. So we develop programs based on prospective needs and existing needs. So we work hand in hand with the EDOs to determine what the needs are currently. We develop programs based on those needs. We develop programs based on forecast needs as well. And without the help of these economic development representatives, we wouldn't do what we do. There's just no way. Yes, we do have direct relationships with businesses. At any given time, we're in partnership with about 60 different employers, like right now.
Yeah.
Providing all kinds of training, safety, computers, IT, robotics, you name it. And that's directly, without necessarily the assistance of EDOs. However, we do need the help of the economic development representatives and personnel to help us get to that next level of workforce development. So it's providing workforce development in the sense of a company comes and needs, I'll give you an example, OSHA training. This is through the Department of Labor certification, where they get a 10-hour certification in occupational safety, and they'll receive an actual credential out of it, and we provide that. Now, in order for us to provide training, we can provide training all day long. We have over 300 to 500 courses and anything you can imagine that a business might need. But it's critical for us to have certain certifications and accreditations as a department and as an institution of higher ed in order for us to convey certain credentials that are nationally, in some cases, internationally recognized, like FANUC robotics. We had to receive certification for FANUC robotics by getting 2 of our full-time instructors themselves certified. They received hundreds of hours of training before we could become certified. We had to receive, we had to have a certain number of robots in our lab in order to meet that certification, and a certain layout in our robotics lab to be able to meet that certification first ourselves. Once we did that, we were accredited as a testing site for FANUC, which is an internationally known manufacturer of robots used by multinational companies worldwide. So now we are at the college are able to not only train in FANUC robotics, but also certify successful completers with a FANUC certification, again, which is internationally recognized.
So this certification, so let's say that some students get this certification. Are there jobs for them here with that certification?
Yes, and sometimes these jobs are not directly related to what they're learning. And let me clarify that. Yes, there are jobs that are directly related to what they're learning in the classroom, but at the same time, there's some indirect jobs that are related to the modules within the course that they have learned. For example, they had to learn industrial computer programming, programmable logic controllers, which is another platform needed to operate integrated automated systems. If an employer, Coca-Cola, for example, here locally, needs an automated conveyor system, let's just give that an example, operated and programmed, somebody who went through our FANUC training would probably be able to do that because they have learned the basis of industrial programming through that FANUC certification.
They can reverse engineer from there.
Correct.
With their training.
Absolutely. And it's not that all of our FANUC students are going to go out and operate a FANUC robot. That's not necessarily the point either. Yeah. We're giving them the fundamentals of integrated technology, instruction, being able to program, troubleshoot automated systems of all different kinds. Now, you will get into specific FANUC operations, and a lot of times they just won't necessarily find a job operating a FANUC, but I can guarantee you what they've learned in our FANUC certification will be applicable to a lot of automated jobs here in the Valley.
Yeah, and the United States or the world.
And they can go wherever they want with that in the world. Exactly.
I mean, I think a lot of the times we want our best human capital to stay in the Rio Grande Valley, South Texas, right? We there's so much investment that goes into the young population, but sometimes it's okay for people to leave, right? And go make their mark. And having coursework, certification programs that, hey, I can stay home, local, get this certification, and there could be search for opportunity anywhere in the country. I think that there's a lot to be said there.
Absolutely, as opposed to the individual receiving a degree in something that he or she is not necessarily interested in or is not in their career path. Yeah. And they're just kind of floating around between jobs waiting for that opportunity. I'd rather they go out to San Antonio, Austin, Dallas if they need to. Looking back at trends, a lot of these individuals that do that eventually return once these jobs open up here locally.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that more and more lately now that the economic development folks are bringing in industry companies that are really developing new jobs with new technologies, new skill sets that are required. And some of these individuals are coming back to the Valley. We're seeing that. I mean, that is something that's reality.
And how long, there's been a big emphasis on degrees versus certifications, right? And being able to get a certification before, 12 months, 18 months was, that's half the time to get a bachelor's degree, right? That's faster. Now employers, and I've heard different leaders from the region say, we need certifications faster. Right. So how is South Texas College adapting to the fast changing, need for education, right?
And yes, and the key word you mentioned is education, because it comes in all different forms. And the department that I oversee, the Center for Advanced Training, we offer non-credit programs and certifications. You alluded to certifications, credentials. That's our focus. We don't offer degrees or certificates, and I mean associate degrees, bachelor's. That is done by our academic counterparts at South Texas College, and they do a great job in offering these associate in the technology programs too. You look at our nursing program, and we have an associates in nursing, and we have associates in welding, automotive technician. Those people who want that degree with those credentials, that's great. But we also have another set of population that, as you mentioned, and employers that just want the certification.
Yeah.
And that's what we do in our department. We offer certifications in welding that are much shorter and quicker. So they still get the American Welding Society certificate at the end, just like they do on the academic side. But it's by choice. It's not by us developing a program to compete with our academic counterparts. It's serving a set of a population and employers that want their students to receive only that certification.
Yeah.
American Welding Society, for example, FANUC certification, OSHA, forklift. I mean, I can go on and on. But you're right. And actually, nationwide, there has been a trend and a movement, and I don't want to say away from degrees because they're still obviously very attractive to a large
industry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but there has been a movement more towards industry recognized certifications, and period. That's it.
And I think for quality of life purposes, life is all about, I tell my wife, it's because we're in this season. I have a 4-year-old and I have a 2-year-old. And my wife says, like, every weekend it's just chaos, right? During the summer, it's chaos. And I'm like, well, this is just the season that we're going through. I think that a lot of young people professionally, they're going through a season. They're trying to figure out, okay, how do I provide? How do I, sometimes young people have families. How do I make something happen? Going to school full time, the traditional route does not work for me. And so I think organizations like STC, you all have seen that and are adapting and trying to figure out, okay, how can we educate someone in 12 months to help them better their quality of life, right? Increase their chances of a better job. The other thing, internships versus apprenticeships. I think a lot of people use it as the same word. Break down the difference. Yeah, break down the difference.
Yeah, so regarding apprenticeships, we at the college are a registered apprenticeship sponsor, which means that, kind of like I mentioned with our earlier certifications with our accrediting bodies that are external, we had to do the same thing with the U.S. Department of Labor, which is become a sponsor to offer apprenticeship programs. And what I mean by that is that as a sponsor, we are not only able to provide the coursework in an apprenticeship program, which is called the related instruction, the classroom part, but we're also able to develop our own programs in-house. We recently developed a veterinary technician because of a request from a school district. Well, we didn't have to go to any other third-party sponsor. We were a sponsor ourselves. We developed a program in-house organically, started with working backwards with local veterinary clinics to develop the curriculum and veterinary technicians, and we got it developed, submitted to the Department of Labor. We get the approval directly, and that allows us as not only to be a training provider, but allows us to be the administrator of the apprenticeship program. So as an administrator of apprenticeship programs, a sponsor, we have right now about 16 registered occupations under our list of registered apprenticeship programs, RAPs, to use the acronym. But those are registered apprenticeship programs are registered through the Department of Labor via a sponsor, in this case, South Texas College, and given their stamp of approval. Given the standards have to be approved, the workplace, and I'll get to more specifics on the workplace learning opportunities, have to be approved by the Department of Labor. So a registered apprenticeship program, by definition, is a student, as long as they're 16 years of age or older, taking classes at a college, in this case, South Texas College, taking college courses, but also working at the same time. Okay. And unlike internships, registered apprentices have to be working year-round. If they're 16, they're still in high school, right? So there's no way they can work full-time. But even if they're working part-time, there's no minimum number of hours. They have to be working year-round in order for them to be an apprentice. That's the key difference between internships and a registered apprenticeship. A registered apprenticeship is a lot more structured, and it has a workplace component. That's not just, okay, you're going to be filing for 5 hours a day or a week, what have you, or you're going to be doing mundane, repetitive work. That's not the point. The point is that in a registered apprenticeship, we have to submit the on-the-job training, if you will, to the Department of Labor for their approval. So in other words, if it's a 1-year, 2-year apprenticeship program, those work hours for those 2 years are already predetermined on paper and submitted, and the employer has to sign off on it. Now, there's flexibility.
They have to agree. The employer basically has to agree, hey, this is going to, because, go get my donuts, go get coffee, go pick up my dry cleaning. That's
not it.
That's not happening.
That's not the point of apprenticeship. The apprenticeship program has to have classroom and relevant work experience. Relevant being the operative term there. It has, and it's all predetermined and predefined. Predefined, and there is some flexibility. The DOL allows for about a 25% variance. The employer, and we understand this, the employer's needs change, and they're going to change over a year for sure.
Adapting to whatever the market.
So we'll change the paperwork submitted to the Department of Labor and say, look, they can't do, if it's an automotive apprentice, they can't do 100 hours and breaks anymore because they just don't need that work, whatever. So modify it accordingly. That's the flexibility the Department of Labor allows. But again, registered apprenticeship means that they have to be taking classes, relevant work experience. If they're high school graduates, they have to be working full time. That's another requirement. If they're out of high school, they must be working 2,000 hours per year. That's full time.
2,000 hours a year.
So and then the minimum number of contact hours per year that they have to take in the classroom is 144 per year. That's for an apprenticeship. Internship. Go ahead.
So if they're a college student, let's say 19, 20 years old, and they're going to school full time, they remain part-time apprentice.
They're actually a full-time apprentice with part-time work. Okay. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Because there's no differentiation between a 16, 17-year-old who's in high school and a 32-year-old who's also an apprentice. They're both
the same
apprentices.
Yeah, they're the same level. Yes.
Yeah. And the only difference between a 16 and a 32-year-old, they're both apprentices. The only difference is one's working full-time and one's working part-time. That's all. And, the 2,000-hour requirement that an adult needs as an apprentice, any hours that the high school student receives, whether it's 500 in the 2 years, the junior, senior year, those 500 hours would be applied to the 2,000-hour requirement after they graduate from high school.
Oh, wow.
So let's say they finish their classroom part while they're still in high school. Once they meet those 2,000 hours, they'll get their apprenticeship credential.
Wow. And how are these apprenticeships paid?
Classroom or the wages?
Both.
Okay. So we'll start with the tuition. Yes, there's a cost to everything. Everything requires anything having to do with higher ed. There's tuition and fees.
It's an investment.
But it's definitely an investment.
Yes.
However, I will say at this point, we have been very fortunate through because of the Texas Workforce Commission and their apprenticeship Texas grants that they have made available to all Texas colleges through a competitive grant process. We've been able to get, I think we're like at number 8 or 9 at this point rounds of apprenticeship Texas grants, which offsets the tuition and fees for individuals wanting to go certain programs. Now, we have limits, but those tuition and fees, for example, our construction superintendent, we have many construction companies here locally who are involved in our construction superintendent. Students are coming, they're taking, I would say, maybe $2,800 worth of tuition per year that's getting paid for by grants. And if not for the grants, either the individual or the employer would have to pay for that tuition, and that would minimize the number of participants.
Yeah. How often have you seen a company pay for those grants?
For the tuition?
For the tuition, yeah. For their human capital debt.
We've had some that pay for it during gap situations, and what I mean by that is there's certain times where a grant will end. The training takes place outside. Training requested by the employer takes place in between grants, if you will. And unfortunately, we tell them, look, we'd have no grants, and there have been some who step up and they'll pay. I mean, and there are individuals, employers who pay. But let me make another point very clear also, because even if it's tuition that's paid for by grants, I understand personally that there is still costs involved. I mean, the employer still has to send the employee to training.
Yes, of course.
So they had to take them off the line or off construction or off whatever. So there's time, even if it's in the personal time. I mean, there's still time constraints. There's still paperwork the employer has to do. So nothing's free.
Yes.
That's why I hesitate to ever call it and address it as free training. I just say that tuition is offset by grants that we have.
Yeah.
Tuition fees.
Well, there's ways to make it work. I mean, I think that the biggest component here is if we have private industry and South Texas College that are coming together and say, hey, there's this demand here to train these students, these apprenticeships, these apprentices. I think that finding that and figuring out how we're going to pay for it is the right order of operation, right? Because a lot of people don't move and say, well, I'm not going to do that because I can't pay for it and I don't know how it's going to be paid for, and I'm not even going to explore it. But here we have a coalition of the willing, so many people that are saying, and we need to start talking about the Prosperity Task Force. You're on the Prosperity Task Force. There's organizations that are saying, if we just work together and help support programs like this, apprenticeships for our future workforce, this is how we're going to get ahead, the next 2-3 decades.
Yes. And it does take a lot of different organizations, and that's always been my message to everybody. And I will say that without our partner agencies, STC would probably not exist, at least not our department. I mean, there's just no way. And I'm not going to pretend to think that I know everything and know the future and can forecast the future, because I don't. And I also, work with others to learn as well. I said I personally, nor my department knows everything. We do not know everything there is to know about apprenticeships yet. We're still learning.
Yeah.
And as we go, we learn more. And I still have made contacts, across other states as well. In South Carolina, when I first, in 2018, I went to go visit a Trident College because they were doing a phenomenal job with youth apprentices at the time. So I went to go see what they were doing and kind of replicated and brought it home and worked with with McAllen Chamber at the time to start replicating what they were doing. And they didn't have a problem with that. And I don't have a problem sharing our knowledge either, which happens a lot too. We get calls from other colleges asking how we're doing X, Y, and Z with apprentices. I said, well, this is how we do it. I learned from others, so I don't mind teaching you. We're in education anyway. But regarding employers, the second part of your original question, just to make sure I don't miss that, is the wages have to be paid by the employers, obviously. Now, the employers can treat these apprentices just like any other employee. There's no special treatment just because they're students or apprentices. I make that very clear to them. If they're not meeting your criteria of a good employee, then you let them go, just like you would any other employee. You do have to pay them 25%, at least I think it's a 25th percentile of the prevailing wage of that occupation that they're training for.
Okay.
So if somebody's training to be a construction superintendent, they have to get paid at least 25% of the prevailing wage of a construction superintendent in this workforce board region.
And where's that data?
It's the workforce board. Texas Workforce Commission has that. So we pull that off. We put it in the paperwork. Say, look, you have to pay this. Every 6 months, you have to give them an increase, even if it's a couple of pennies. Mm-hmm. DOL, thank God, doesn't say, well, you have to give them whatever amount increase. But as long as it's an increase, that's what makes it an apprenticeship program. I mean, employers have to do that, and that's sometimes the hard part too, is that employers are sometimes used to internships with colleges. The first thing they ask is, I need interns, I need bodies, I need people just to come and do some work for us. But I have to clarify, internships are typically, 200-300 hours during an academic program, capstone, what we call at STC programs. And yes, they get 200-300 hours of work experience, but it's usually temporary. That's whenever they can, they get that out of the way, part of their degree plan, they're done. Apprenticeship is, and sometimes internships are not paid. They could be,
majority of the time they're not paid. And I've experienced it, that the internships that sometimes, students have come to our company, hey, can I do an internship here? They'll take it as, in replacement of a course.
Uh-huh.
And they want nothing to do with commercial real estate. They're just looking to do an internship and,
get credit.
Get credit. Like this apprenticeship is much more focused with the private sector, but also I'm sure with the actual apprentice. Like, hey, well, you're making a commitment to grow and educate yourself in this chosen field. And I mean, I think back at all of my education, and I'm like, man, that sounds great. Like, I would love to be an apprentice to someone, right? Overall, I think that things like this that are encouraging people to try different things, get new certifications, is like the most important part. Why is the Department of Labor so focused on these like registered apprenticeships?
Because they know probably more than anybody else that apprenticeships work. Apprenticeship programs have been around for hundreds of years internationally and in Europe, etc. But it's a system that works. It's a system that works because it combines training and on-the-job learning at the same time as you're going, and it's relevant work experience. And the best part is that the students are getting paid. So talk about a motivating factor for students to remain in the program. Well, first of all, to get in the program, that not only are they going to be working towards learning something, but while they're taking classes, I think you mentioned earlier, sometimes, you have seasons, you have needs, and sometimes people, can't take classes, sometimes they can. In this case, they're taking classes and they're earning money at the same time. The important part is you have to find a way to do both. You have to find a way to work and take these classes. Now, I will say that, and again, the continued push from the Department of Labor or the United States in general, the U.S. government, has been because of the results. They're statistically speaking, mainly talking about youth apprentices. There's over a 90% chance that they're going to stay with that company after 3 years if they're an apprentice. There's over a 90% chance that if they don't have a job, that they will land a job right after they start taking classes for an apprenticeship program. So the job factor, I think, is what the United States government is really looking at. The more we can get, the quicker we can get people in jobs and stay in jobs. It's both.
Yes,
I think that's just the backbone of economic development. Because at the end, employers prosper. I mean, employers are going to be the beneficiaries because they become more productive. They have lower costs in turnover. They have lower costs for training new employees. They have, at the forefront, they're probably going to have some initial costs of having an apprentice that may be a little inexperienced, but we're giving them classroom instruction from day one. They're learning every day. It's not like we're just throwing you somebody who's green and, good luck and train them. No, we're training them in the classroom at the college. That's our job.
Yeah.
And you give them the on-the-job experience so that what they're learning in the classroom becomes relevant. And makes sense. And that just expedites the learning process for the individual. The United States sees that, and they want others to just start expanding the process. But going back, colleges can't do it alone. Apprenticeship sponsors, and I know colleges are not the only apprenticeship sponsors. I mean, their sponsors could be an individual company, it could be private training provider, it could be just about anybody. However, we need employers to meet us right at the midpoint, because without employers paying and hiring and having a mentor, because an apprenticeship program requires an apprentice to have a mentor on the job.
So important.
That's the key. And that doesn't mean that the mentor is going to get off the job and just be, hovering over the apprentice. No, they are working together side by side, shadowing, The apprentice does what they need to do. The mentor checks up on him or her, and that's the way it's working out.
Someone to go to for guidance. I think that anyone going through an apprenticeship program is trying to kind of figure things out, like all of us, right? And so when you have a mentor that you can turn and say, like, hey, where do I get coffee? It makes it a lot easier.
You have a go-to person.
Yeah, the go-to. Now, South Texas College, why have you focused specifically on apprenticeships? Because you've been very passionate. I know you've been on a recent speaking tour, speaking to different leaders throughout the STC district. Why do you see apprenticeships for this region specifically important?
I've been doing this for 20 plus years, our workforce development, workforce training, and I've seen the changes in the environment, the workforce environment. Things are not like they used to be when I first started. I mean, when I first started at South Texas College, it was manufacturing companies, kicking at our door, demanding that they wanted workers, they wanted employees, they wanted people trained right now, and it was just a one-way street at that point. I mean, we would get bullied a lot by employers and saying, look, I need employees now. Now, I think it's been an educational process even for employers since we've been doing this. The employers have been getting more engaged, but that process is still a little hamstrung by a lot of unknowns. And unfortunately, it is what it is, but that's my interest right now. I have seen, because of apprenticeship programs, and I'm going to say apprenticeship, but also any work-based learning program. Even if there's programs out there that are informal internships, people getting paid, if any time an individual is in a classroom and getting, not even in a classroom, let's just say they're high school students, or they want to go shadow a phlebotomist or a medical technician or a doctor, that's great. Any work-based learning opportunities is the key, and that's where it's coming from. Yes, exposure, and that to me right now is my passion. And I have two daughters in high school. Actually, one just graduated, and I see the opportunities that they could have if they're out there just exposing themselves to what they think they want right now, because it could be, and it happens a lot of times. People think they know what they want to do in life, but once they get their degree and they start working, they say, I don't really want this. But they just spent 2, 3, 4 years, whatever, bachelor's or associate degree, and they want to switch paths. But if they would have learned more on the job while they were still in high school, they could have diverted their path according to their actual needs and strengths. And that to me is huge, because now we're seeing more and more and this has been a decision that I personally made, is to tap into high schools a lot more. And I know a lot of it had to do with just watching my kids go through all this and seeing things from their lenses. And it's like, what are you all doing to try to see what you all want to do for the, I know my daughter already knows what she wants to do. Okay, well, I've already given her the chance to go visit some veterinary clinics because that's what she wants to do. Not everybody has that opportunity. Yeah. If we, through a college, working with employers, can give more students this opportunity, economic development is going to just
take care of itself.
It is, yes.
Yeah. And a younger, and exposure
again,
younger.
My focus right now, and I keep saying apprenticeship, but I don't want to say, youth, but I'm really meaning youth apprenticeship. And youth doesn't mean that it's a whole separate category. All that means is that they're not working full time. Yeah. But I don't care. If you give a student 10 hours a week to go work year round, that's huge. For a junior or a senior. Yes. And then they'll tell you right away, you know what, I don't like blood, I don't want to do this, I don't like animals, or I don't want this. Okay, well then good. You still have time to switch.
Yeah.
But I mean, one more thing I did want to mention is that the reason this is getting traction is because we're getting more and more school districts interested in this concept. And that to me has been giving me a lot more motivation. And the more they express their interest, the more I get motivated to continue expressing this. And that's why I'm having these employer forums, because I'm telling employers, hey, look, I got a wave of high school students that are getting more interested in it. Not just the students. I want to commend a lot of the high school administrators. There are, CT directors, deans. We're talking about all kinds of, superintendents also. They're jumping on board, and they're starting to see this. Unfortunately, in the past, I had some really bad luck with certain school districts who just, couldn't fit it in. They didn't have the scheduling opportunities for the students or their time or whatever. Now they're starting to see that. Now I need the employers to be able to hire these individuals part-time and then full-time. That's where I'm at right now, and that's where my passion is, because I think the economic development for the next 5 years really depends on work-based learning opportunities from high school students.
So right now you have 16 registered occupations.
Yes.
For the apprenticeships. So if you're talking to the private sector right now, what is your pitch to them?
My pitch to them is we have these apprenticeship programs that are registered because of demand from probably other employers or school districts. I said, I need your input because we have another 15, 16 under development right now that are about to become approved, added to the 16. So pretty soon we'll have 20, 30. If any of this is not what you need, tell us right now what you need so we can start working with you and start developing a curriculum just like we did for most of these. We work with a curriculum, send it to the Department of Labor. It has to fit certain guidelines for the DOL. I can't just develop something and then they're going to sign off on it.
Of course.
We will have to meet certain levels of standards with the DOL. But I have to work with the local employers to contextualize the curriculum to fit their local needs. Okay. That's my pitch to them is like, this is, and the other part of the pitch is that we have grant funds right now. I said, we develop these programs. I mean, I can't promise you, but we've already in our 8th or 9th round of Apprenticeship Texas grant funding. That's been over like $2.8 million that we have received as a college through competitive grants that have offset tuition for over 500-600 apprentices.
Okay, so let's say that again. Okay, so since 2018, you all have received grants for these different programs in the total sum of $2.8 million.
That's correct. Yeah.
And how confident are you? Obviously, it's not a for sure thing. How confident are you in continuing to get those grants? I mean, let's say that from today to next month, you're able to put together a pipeline of 50 new occupations, right, for a curriculum. Are those grants going to be available?
I appreciate the question because I'm sure I'm going to get that question in the next employer forum. And I am very confident that we are going to continue applying for these grants because they are competitive. There is another round of funding, from what I understand, coming down from the Department of Labor through the Workforce Commission for apprenticeship training. I'm very confident that we will continue receiving funds. Every time we apply for a grant, we have to put specific occupations. And that's why it's really important that the employers that we're speaking with right now tell us what they're looking for. If they're looking for IT specialist or anything regarding, we need to know now so we can put that in the grant.
So it qualifies.
To qualifies, yes, correct. Like we had to, one school district wanted a paralegal apprentice, which we have. We had to put that in our recent grant. So it got funded for like 12 students. So.
Paralegal, I mean, that sounds like an apprenticeship program that a high school student looking to be a lawyer one day could start and get their feet wet, right? Talk to us about some other occupations that high school students could start in. And I mean, it could be the difference between them spending 4 years in college just to figure out, oh, I don't really like it, right? Or finding out early. Give us some examples of these occupations.
I'll give you another one is CNC machinist, which is a metalworking occupation that manufacturers here utilize, or manufacturers obviously everywhere utilize, but we do have manufacturing companies here that have machine shops where they use computer numerical control, which is essentially automated machines that cut through metal and that sort of thing. But students learn the programming. They'll learn how to operate the machine. They'll learn how to first work on the machine manually before you automate it, because everything's becoming automated now. Yeah. So the sooner you can get a student, a high school student, if let's just say a high school junior right now wants to join our CNC machining program, apprenticeship program, which we have, I know a couple of employers will very likely hire her or him at this point part-time. Yeah, they can go in there, work a few hours, learn how to program the machine a few times, and have it work on its own. But it goes down. You need to troubleshoot it. But at the same time, you're getting that experience that you wouldn't otherwise get, and you're learning that. And they'll be taking classes with us. Yes. And we have the same machines in our labs already. You don't lose by going through this whatsoever. You either find exactly what you want, or you figure out what you don't want. You know the direction to go. Well, yeah, and for example, and again, I will say that we really rely a lot in the high schools, because, a lot of employers will ask me, okay, well, how do I know what I'm getting as far as an apprentice? I said, yeah, valid question. I said, fortunately, we're working with very enthusiastic CT directors and others at high schools and school districts who are already looking at these students and already filtering out those that are not really interested in that career path. So you're getting somebody who's already interested in manufacturing, somebody who's already
Pre-qualified.
Yeah, they pre-qualified it. They'll pre-qualify these individuals, and it's to the point where you're not getting just anybody. You're already getting somebody who at least has an interest in working in manufacturing or industry.
More calculated.
And usually these students we'll give them competency exams also. If they don't qualify, then we'll put them in a pre-apprentice program. The one for the paralegal, the school district out of Edinburgh at South Texas ISD is actually going to help us get them placed at local. That's a perfect place, with local law firms or law offices rather, and have them work part time.
No, that's amazing. It looks better on their resume later if they became a paralegal and later went to law school, or if they choose to stay there for that their career. So what is, in 5 years, what do you hope to see from this apprenticeship program? What's your internal goal right now, being able to look back 5 years from now?
I want the apprenticeship program to be part of the workforce ecosystem, a permanent part of the system. And I want it to be a major component of everything that has to do with workforce training and workforce development. It has to be a core component of it, because the more you give individuals an opportunity to get that work-based learning, the more everybody involved benefits, from the individual who's learning and earning at the same time, but for the employer as well, who's reducing their costs and improving their efficiency and productivity because of that. But it's not going to be it's not perfect right now, and it probably won't be perfect in 5 years, but we're going to continue improving it. But I do and would like to see that be a permanent fixture in the workforce development system going forward.
And all the economic development corporations, the school district, what is their feedback when you tell them about the apprenticeship program and the overall focus?
It's positive feedback, but there are question marks. I do get a lot of questions about, okay, well, do I have to do 2,000 hours? And the answer is yes. I mean, and apprenticeship may not be for everybody. I mean, if you can't commit a mentor to at least be there, and again, I will emphasize, the mentor's not going to be out of their job because they have to watch over and babysit somebody. That's not the key. No. And that's part of our educational process once they become an employer participant. But we'll get this. So there's a lot of education that's still required, even for those that are in the program right now. That we have about over 50 employers currently participating in our apprenticeship programs. They still have questions. I mean, they still have questions, but they're running full speed ahead. The questions and the feedback that I get from other agencies, Workforce Solutions, a lot of those questions are just clarification questions. How do I do X? How do I do Y? How much do I have to pay them? How much do I have to increase their pay? What happens if they mess up at work? Do I... And all those questions I try to answer beforehand, and that's the point of these employer sessions, is the seminars that I'm putting on, is just to put them a little bit more at ease and let them know. Now, and I will emphasize, and I do say these at the employer sessions, is this is not easy. I'm not going to say that this is just, sign up and forget about it. It's not. You have to participate, and that's my point in getting this message across. I said, I'm sorry, but the days are over where you're kicking on our door and demanding for students. I think it's kind of a middle ground now where we need you just as much as you need us. And we have to work together in order to get this done, because just again, in my personal experience, but again, nationwide, you see apprenticeship programs flourishing because of this. Because employers I saw that firsthand in Charleston, was some of these automotive companies, Bosch Manufacturing, others were hiring these youth apprentices like crazy. They wanted them. They wanted more. Just couldn't get more.
Well, what's the saying? The CFO is talking to the CEO, and he's saying, "Hey, what if we train them and they leave?" And he says, "Well, what if we don't train them and they stay?"
Yeah, that's.
And so employers, I think, that are focused on being in business long term understand that the next generation of workforce, of leadership in any company, regardless of what it is, whether it's construction or paralegal, human capital is the most important component. So I think overall, the right companies will come and participate, and the ones that don't obviously aren't securing their future, right?
right? And it's true that, some of them think, okay, I'm going to train them, they're going to leave. We get that all the time. Because remember, before apprenticeship, or even now, apprenticeship is only a percentage of what we do as a department. We do customized training, which is not apprenticeship every day, which is we give somebody forklift training, safety. We give somebody FANUC that I mentioned before, certification. That's not apprenticeship. That's essentially the core of what we do. Apprenticeship has become, for the last 6 years, a growing part of it. But we get that a lot with our customized training. Even if it's paid for by grants, they won't show up for training. I don't understand why. And again, I don't call it free training because I know there's still resources. But the thing is, if they don't show up for training or they don't send their employees for training, you're right. They're going to stay there. It's going to be 5 years, and they're still doing the same repetitive stuff with bad habits and not doing that. But the apprenticeship program, and I will say, when you talked about people leaving or staying on the job, statistically speaking, if you have an apprentice, they're much more likely to stay on the job with you long term than anybody else, non-apprentice. That's another. I don't want to say an actual percentage, but it is from my research. Statistically speaking, employees will stay with you much longer, probably much longer in the long term as well, if they're an apprentice. If they started as an apprentice.
I think in employees overall, especially this next generation, and especially after we experienced COVID, really changed what we define as work. Technology, yesterday I was at my house in the afternoon and there was 5 different delivery people that delivered. One was FedEx, one was UPS, one was the post office, one was Uber Eats, one was Sprouts. All delivery. And I'm thinking wow, look at all of those jobs. Look at the new industry. You order something on Amazon and it's I want it now. I just clicked enter. I want it now. The market's changing. And I think that employees feel that if a company is investing in me, I have a responsibility to give back the same investment. Every day, work hard, do the right thing. If I take care of the company's going to take care of me, right? That's the lingo. That's what we've been taught for generations. But unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. It doesn't. But I think that if a company invests in an apprenticeship program and invests in those people, they obviously are showing that they're committed to their people in the long term. So.
They are, and the key and to a lot of this is giving. And I know you're going back to your remarks about COVID. It had a drastic impact on individuals, employed, unemployed, soon to be employed. Myself included. Everybody was impacted. It just made a lot of people, and I hate to say it, made a lot of people lazy. People are home. There's nothing to do. Just kind of sitting around, do what you need to do. It's hard to get people out of that hole.
Yeah,
and. What I always try to tell people right now is workforce training gives people a purpose, a sense of purpose. And that's what I think a lot of people need right now. And I can get into other areas where we got, for example, veterans. We got programs that are specific for veterans. And I know not all veterans are combat veterans, but especially those that were in combat, suffering from issues. It could be PTSD, it could be anything. They lack that purpose. They've come back from a theater where they were fighting, and now it's totally different being in civilian life.
Yes.
They need to get that purpose. And again, veterans are just a small example. There's other populations all over that need that sense of purpose. Apprenticeship just accelerates that sense of purpose, and I'll tell you why, because they're getting to work from day one. You give somebody training, yes, they feel like they're motivated. But if you get them training and actually working on something that they feel an accomplishment, I tell everybody, look, just accomplish a small goal, a small objective, one step at a time. Then work on the next one. That's how you get people out of poverty, out of situations, out of circumstances that they feel hopeless and out of control.
Yeah, I always tell my team, and I tell myself a lot, yes, we want to focus on the big picture of the finish line. Where are we going? What direction? But ultimately, I want to make today the best day. Mm-hmm. And so if we just little bits of progress, a little training, a little bit of exposure to a new industry, I think that those are things that keep the students, the youth, the companies coming back. Okay, you're telling me there's a chance, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, well, Dr. Carlos Margo, thank you so much for sitting down with us and talking to us about STC and the apprenticeship programs. I'm hoping that the next time that we sit down, you have over 50 registered, occupations, and more companies are jumping on board. Is there anything specifically that you want to let our audience know?
I do want to say thank you to all of our partners out there, Workforce Solutions, Local Workforce Board, Texas Workforce Commission at the state level. All the economic development organizations that we work with in our 2-county district, and others out there. And again, I mentioned that there's so much to do, but STC cannot do it alone. We need our partners, and in this case, definitely our business partners. But one thing real quick about apprenticeship programs is not just for the private sector. We have several municipalities participating in that, and I do want to thank them as well. City of Alton, Mission, Edinburgh. Others are actually hiring apprentices. So this is not just for the private sector. I encourage all employers to join an apprenticeship program because it's the right way to go. At least right now, I think it's the most effective way to train and educate our workforce.
I want to thank the grant writers that have helped get that $2.8 million.
Absolutely right, yes.
And we need to pray that their grants continue to get approved so that this mission can continue to move forward. Well, thank you so much. We look forward to having you in the near future.
Thank you very much.